like at the end of the whole thing to say, more like.
Do you want to? I'm just going to kick off this next session.
Okay.
Maybe talk to Caitlin, and she'll. All right, we are going to get started. I do want to thank, once again, Caroline Phillips for moderating that first session, and to the panelists for bringing such a diverse perspective to the table. This next panel should be just as interesting. We're going to switch gears and talk about jobs and fostering employment opportunities once recreational marijuana passes. So it's quite exciting. For this conversation, we've invited Martin Austermuhle, a reporter with the local NPR affiliate WAMU. Martin covers politics, development, education, social issues, and crime, among other things. He joined the WAMU staff in April 2013. Prior to that, served as editor-in-chief for DCS.com. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here, happy to be talking about the issue, and happy to have these panelists along with me for the ride. I'm going to say as little as possible because all the experts are here to my left, your guys is right. But like was mentioned, this panel discussion is about green jobs. Essentially, instead of talking about the gray market and the situation the district is in right now, where you have medical and then you have something else that is not fully legal, this is looking forward, assuming that the district at some point, if Congress lets us, passes a bill and legalizes recreational marijuana. What is that going to look like? What's the industry going to look like? Who gets the benefit from the industry? And I think it's a huge topic, not only because we're talking a lot of jobs, we're talking a lot of revenue for the city, which is ultimately what council members say really matters, is that's a lot of tax money coming in that could benefit other programs. But the issue of who gets to play in this industry, I mean, we're just looking in Maryland where they've had, just on the medical side, trying to get equity, trying to get diversity in the industry itself. It's been a roller coaster / a whole mess. I think just last week, you guys might know that they tried to get more licenses out, and there's now a lawsuit that has stopped the process because there's allegations that there's not really diversity in a lot of the applicants who are supposed to be diverse. So a lot of concerns about who benefits from these potentially multi-million, multi-billion-dollar industries. But we're going to start right now quickly. I think the panelists are going to introduce themselves and give a very quick kind of opening statement, and then we'll just start with some Q&A, and then I'll throw to you guys as quickly as possible because I think some of the best questions often come from the audience, not from me. So I will just start with Shanita.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shanita Penny. I'm the founder and CEO of Budding Solutions. And until yesterday, I was also the head of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. For the last 3 years, I have been a part of the first trade association in the country focused on the individuals and communities impacted by the war on drugs. So we've made it our business to not only ensure that we legalize cannabis, but that we do so in an equitable way. And that certainly applies to both employment and ownership in the space.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Corey Barnette. I am the founder of District Growers here in Washington, D.C. I also am the founder of Metropolitan Wellness here in Washington, D.C. I've owned operations in D.C. since the beginning of our medical marijuana program. Prior to that, I owned the San Diego Medical Collective and Chi Holistic and a series of cultivation operations in California. Today, I am also one of the leaders and serve on the board of the Tribe Companies, which is a California-based operation, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Luminous, which is a Massachusetts-based operations. Both of those, or all of my operations, are vertically integrated, and we partner with a lot of businesses in every place that we go. And so it's good to be here to talk about what opportunities really kind of look like in the space and where the biggest opportunities, not only for employment, but for advancement and really making an impact in your career in the space is today. Happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Lewis. I'm an author, activist, advocate for men, women, and children impacted by mass incarceration. And for the last 16 years, I've worked specifically in workforce development for men and women that have been just as involved or formerly incarcerated. Very happy to be here, part of this illustrious panel.
Good afternoon. Really grateful for the platform and for all of you who are interested in figuring out how we claim a stake in this multi-billion-dollar industry. I'm Kareem Webb. I'm CEO of Fourth Movement. It is a business that finds and vets people who qualify for social equity programs around the country, 100% finances them and trains them, and surrounds them with all the resources necessary to compete and win in the marketplace. We anticipate having about 30 units in LA, which would give us the largest footprint and the biggest market in the country, and we're in Illinois now and looking to find ways to add value in other places around the country.
All right, well, now that we have the introductions out of the way, let's get straight to the Q&A. And my first question, and I know a lot of you guys might know this, but I think for those who don't, and myself included, what I'm curious about is, again, let's jump into the world of hypotheticals. Let's say at some point this year, Congress, allows the district to move forward on its bill, the council passes the bill, the mayor signs it, and now suddenly recreational marijuana is legal, and the city is tasked with the idea of creating an industry, basically a way to produce it and sell it on the recreational side. What sorts of jobs are we talking about? And not just, obviously, the growers and the sellers, that's the basic stuff, but I wanted to put this to Corey and maybe to Shanita. What sorts of, how big of a market, of a job market are we talking here? And what sorts of jobs are people going to be doing other than the usual stuff you associate with legalized cannabis, which is the folks who grow it and then the folks who ultimately sell it?
I'll let you go first.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind for me before you ever get to a place of growing or selling is applying for the license. And so if you've been around, you know what an extensive and very expensive process that is. So you have to first and foremost hire consultants that have subject matter expertise in compliance in the specific business that you want to be in, whether that's cultivating or manufacturing or retail. And so you have to start there. And so you're going to be looking for folks with finance backgrounds, compliance backgrounds, legal, and ideally someone that has worked in a legal cannabis market. Because we're talking about adult use, medical, you're going to have some expertise from the medical industry that's currently here. But there's a huge opportunity to find subject matter experts that are truly passionate about empowering the people that they're working with. This doesn't have to be a play for some other company to expand their footprint. Ideally, you want to find folks that are dedicated to building DC's economy, and that means that you're going to be able to apply for that license and maintain ownership of that it will not be a license that then goes to one of the existing large operators and you become a very small player in that team. So first things first, look at folks that have real estate experience in the area, folks that have retail and other community experience with the community, and build a team that's local and diverse.
I completely agree. In addition to that, when you look at sort of that post-license, now I've won sort of environment, the cannabis industry touches so many other industries. If you think about how most of you guys found out about cannabis and how you interact with it from outside the space right now, if you don't currently have a license, it touches media, it touches transportation, it touches law, it touches marketing, it touches all areas of sort of business services. Everything that's necessary to support most other industries is also necessary to support the cannabis industry. So injecting that kind of a industry into our city, into our economy here, will actually have feeder into other areas that create substantial opportunities. There will be entire law firms and entire marketing firms that are focusing their practices on these kinds of spaces. Transportation companies, distribution providers, advisory, consultants, all these types of ancillary sort of services will be ignited by the introduction of the cannabis industry. And then nascent inside of the sort of plant-touching world, there's all sorts of experts and novices that are necessary to make this industry grow. You need literally the people who just simply have an interest but may not have know-how, have an opportunity in this space. This may be the last time that we get to see someone without a college education come into a space, or may not have even finished high school, come into a space where they can have a job actually making a product for the next 20 or 30 years. Because when you think of cannabis, Like, right now, the technology has not caught up with the needs of the industry. Manufacturing equipment have not caught up with the needs of the industry. When I first started my grow here in Washington, D.C., I wanted to have a 100% aeroponic grow, right? But there were no commercial systems for aeroponics. There were no manufacturers that I could call that could give me commercial aeroponic systems and things of that nature. So technology, machinery, equipment have not caught up with where our industry needs to be. We're on this incredible innovation track. And so when you think of the cannabis industry, it's not just, growing a plant, buying a pot, growing a plant, and then selling it in a store, right? It's so much more than that. And so I believe that this will be one of the most impactful industries to touch our city since technology, and probably even more so than technology did in terms of job creations and sparking other ancillary areas.
And to just jump off that, and then I can open it up to anybody else who wants to take this question. The one thing that we've often found in DC, and this is lots of cities, is that there could be a certain market, there could be a certain industry that's very profitable, that there's a lot of jobs, but the disconnect is between getting residents trained up for the jobs in those markets. So like hospitality, huge hospitality industry in DC, but the problem has always been, do you have the residents ready to go into those jobs? And so the city works on that, workforce development, that sort of stuff. Is that gonna be necessary here, or is this enough of an industry that you can get in with less than a high school degree, or do you think the city will have to invest in workforce development programs the same way they do for other industries?
I think that to go back to Shanita's point, ownership matters. So when you start talking about jobs, yes, the careers are ubiquitous. Everything that people have to do in our business is a $500,000 a month payroll. There's marketing, there's government relations, there's accounting, there's HR, there's everything in it, every other business, and then all the consultancies and all the businesses that we do business with. There's very few people that are really in the plant touching space. It's just doing business. But who I am as a founder and a CEO matters, because I'm gonna hire people and have the ability to develop people with a level of cultural competency that wouldn't otherwise exist if I didn't have it. I think there's, in addition to the ability to go do business, set aside licenses for social equity programs around the country, which I think really has become the prerequisite to go from the medical licensing space to adult use. I mean, we've seen things break down in New York and in New Jersey. We saw the law that was recently passed in Illinois. Hopefully when we get adult use here, there'll be a robust social equity considerations. But once we get the licenses, that's another reason for social equity, not just for the owner, but for the mindset of the person that has that license, who's committed to developing people, who doesn't make people wrong for where they are. We don't need necessarily a city workplace development program by the city when there are entrepreneurs who are culturally competent that can take people where they are and develop them to do what's needed in that business.
Can I?
Yeah, totally.
First of all, everybody, I'm a novice on this panel, right, in this space. But where my expertise lies, though, is in workforce development, and particularly around individuals that have been incarcerated, but then more specifically, men and women born in this city. And so, as this is rolled out here, I would like to see a true focus on the DC native. We look at, even a lot of the rhetoric around war on drugs that we hear about across the country, and people that's impacted. DC was probably impacted by the war on drugs more severely than anywhere in a city that was our criminal justice system is all black for the most part. And so the jobs that you speak of, the jobs that a lot of that I'm sitting here thinking, like, can my clients work there though? And as 10% of the city's population have been just as involved, maybe 45% of natives have been involved in the criminal justice system in this city, right? And so I think we have to be super intentional around the licensing, the business creation, the workforce. What are the barriers? Like, we need to remove barriers from employment, barriers from who can own. And as it stands, I know, again, there's a lot of things here that makes us unique with a federal city. But again, if everything can't be covered immediately, but it needs to be. And my thing is, in terms of preparation. This is the one that you spoke about hospitality, you spoke about tech in this city. And one of the things that I've seen is that what's dangerous is that we try to start to connect the dots once things launch, right? Because we can't catch, the need is too great. Can't catch up. We have to prepare people in advance. So we know this is 6 months, 9 months down the road, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's the city, we need to start that, and we need to go directly to the people that need it the most, and that's the DC native, because people from other places, there's no disrespect to anybody from other places, because I get people, say, Tony, you anti. I'm not anti anywhere, but I'm talking about the people that I grew up with, the people I gotta walk past every day, that see all of this happening, they're not a part of it, that is very, very important that even in our policy, I feel, we could say 60% black ownership, or people of color, whatever, no, but I need to see something about people born in this city, because we're not a part of enough here. And I think nobody can deny that the DC native is not enough a part of anything related to talking about the war on drugs or mass incarceration. That's us. We represent that. So if there's gonna be something to connect the dots, we need to be a part of that.
I believe it's important to, when we have these kinds of conversations, because he's absolutely right. I believe it's important to also recognize kind of where we are in the district versus where people are in the country, right? Because there are some things that are somewhat unique about what's going on in DC's regulated market here versus other places, right? In other places, we have had to have, like places like in Los Angeles and in Oakland and places that are traditional cities of color, we have had to have, certain types of things that make sure that minorities get a chance. Here in Washington, D.C., I don't know how many people know, but the majority of dispensaries are currently owned by people of color, right? And if you want to talk about looking at the labor force in Washington, D.C., what you see is that most people who actually work in the dispensaries look like the owners of the dispensaries. I sat on the panel, I sat before the city council early on in the medical marijuana market here in Washington, D.C., and I made the case as at the time, the only black winner. I made the case that if we don't find a way to diversify our industry here in Washington, D.C., then we will not have people who look like the residents of the city, are from the city, or are making an investment in the city, be a part of this industry. And so I'm all about hiring DC residents. I don't just draw the line at people who were born in DC, because those aren't all the people that get arrested in DC, right? And there are people who are not from DC who are downtown right now, standing before the judge, fighting for their freedom. And so, but we do know that they all look a certain way. They all seem to live in certain neighborhoods. And to the degree that we can provide positive outcomes for the people who are living in the district right now, along with the people who were born in the district, and make sure that those communities that are being hit by the war on drugs and have been hit by the war on drugs get to actually have access and opportunities in this space, I think that's an outcome that the entire city can actually benefit from. In addition to that, and this is the last thing I'll kind of say on this, we have to ensure that the systems that have made our market one that is diverse today stay in place, right? We should applaud the mayor's efforts to make sure that 60% of ownership is resident from the district. I actually think it could be higher, but I do clap my hands to the fact that she is willing to go out on her first law, right? Not after we've had to fight in courts like we did in Maryland, not after we have to have 2 and 3 bids, and then we put these licenses in place that are supposed to go to people of color, but then companies like Acreage and GTI end up winning the licenses or what have you. So our mayor actually stood up and on her first approach said, no, you need to hire people living in the district that have lived in the district for quite a while, and you need to actually make sure that people in the district own. That is strong. It's why we've been able to have a diverse market today. It's why 3 of the 4 minority owners of dispensaries are actually in the room right now. And if you ask them about their labor forces, what they'll probably tell you is that a lot of people look like them. You have women, you have people of color, and you have people who are resident in this actual city contributing to the city both today and have been contributing since the birth. So I applaud what we're doing here in Washington, D.C. I think we have the kind of systems that do it right. Certainly the numbers suggest that the outcomes are the kind of outcomes we all in this room want to actually have and be the case.
So, you know, obviously the district certainly wouldn't be the first place to have a legal recreational market. You know, looking across the countries at the places that have gone through this already and the struggles that they face, because there have been places that have tried to give priority to diverse ownership groups or employees and faced lawsuits because people say, no, you can't overtly consider a person's race or kind of where they come from. It has to be very neutral in that sense. Are there any places across the country that you guys think have done this right? Maybe it's not that it's been the perfect outcome, but they've actually been thinking it through and said, we want the outcome to be a diverse industry that represents our residents and our citizens. It could be on the medical or the recreational side.
Yeah, I think what LA is doing is really interesting, and I think it is an example for something that DC might consider as things go recreational. And it's not a race consideration, but it is an application of criminal justice consideration. And we know that whether we were individually impacted by going to jail, if you were somebody's child or mother or sister or cousin, or you lived on the block where the intellectual capital, the heart and soul of the humanity that goes away from home, it impacts us. And so in LA, the zip codes that experience the top 10% of arrests residents from those areas qualified to get licensed through social equity programming. They had 5 years of cumulative residency. And so I think, like the brother said, it's critical that people from Washington, D.C. get priority and preference around licensing and ownership. The caveat, the thing that I would add in addition to that is winning businesses. So we're hearing from a brother who has a winning business, not only here, but experience in California on boards that are doing things well. The brother knows how to compete and win, because there will be, when recreational comes, there will be big tobacco, there will be the multi-billion-dollar, what they call MSOs, multi-state operators that will be in the space. There will be people who get social equity licenses and who aren't going to be able to resist the temptation to sell those businesses for multi-millions of dollars to folks that are going to try to aggregate big footprints around the country. We need to be in a position not only to be capitalized, some of the conversation from the previous panel, but be focused on a way of being, right? This is business. It is new industry and is a tremendous opportunity for us to create wealth and to create really, I think, a standing. Social equity is not about money, it's about living equitably in America. And it's about our ability to stand on our own 2 feet and say we belong here, we're not apologizing for being here, we have a right to be here strong, and we can operate businesses for the general market as African American owners from Washington, D.C. in as good or better than anybody else.
I think it is important to look at places like LA and similarly Boston. But one of the things that we did run into there were the fact that these people then had to prove with tax records, right, that they were living in these zip codes at this particular point in time. And so you've put a burden on those folks that sometimes is a barrier to them even participating in those programs. Without access to capital, the participants in those programs become prey. They are targets for the MSOs. They're targets for well-funded investors. And we also don't want to limit folks. You know, if your exit strategy includes selling your social equity license for millions, I think that's something that you should be able to do. It's a game changer for people, and it's something that we should allow for some diversity in how these businesses, some are going to be small, some are going to grow to be the MSOs. I just want to back it up really quickly to the earlier question. And we talk about how big this job market is going to be. We talk about how big these companies are going to be. But you have to be prepared. We don't have a formal pipeline of talent when we talk about jobs. And so while we don't need to go reinvent the wheel as it relates to workforce development, we do need to marry this industry to existing workforce development programs. What we need to do is wrap our arms around the legacy operators. You keep wanting to relegate them to this black market. They are the legacy of this industry. We need to find a way to embrace them. And as we're thinking about regulating this industry, we need them at the table. They are just as important a stakeholder as anyone else. What we've done in this country as we've regulated, especially on the adult use side, is that we have created a product that is more expensive than the consumer wants to pay for. What we've done is created an industry that the legacy operator cannot operate in and make the money that he or she was making before. And so we have to back it up, and now is the time for each and every one of you to be involved in the conversation and the planning for what's about to happen in the District of Columbia, so that we can be united against and hopefully aligned with the MSOs that we're ultimately competing with.
So one last question for me, and then I want to throw out to anybody in the audience. So if you have a question, start coming up with it, and then we'll get a mic to you. But one critical thing is obviously what the laws are going to say. So whatever the council passes will say X, Y, and Z. But as with all things, it's when the rubber hits the road that matters. How is that going to be enforced? What things are going to pop up that might derail the spirit of the law and make it more complicated for that, kind of the spirit to become reality? So for you guys looking around the country or just looking at DC, thinking about the experience that you have, what are some of these kind of obstacles that you see coming up that could really derail the good intentions of this idea of saying that you want a diverse industry that is benefiting local residents and folks who have been here the longest and folks who have suffered at the hands of the war on drugs?
I would say definitely, first of all, in DC, we can't really expunge or seal too much, right? So again, talking about the large percentage of DC natives that have criminal histories, at this point, this industry and all of these jobs and opportunities won't necessarily be available for them. And that, to me, that's criminal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
and I think we really have to just understand, right? We peel back the layers and really understand in this city, that's an amazing place to live. It's a beautiful place to live. I enjoy so much of the growth that we experienced. But when I look around and I'm in rooms or I'm on panels and I'm like the only Washingtonian, I'm not saying in this room, but I'm just telling, this is normal, right? Mm-hmm. A generation of people, and that may not be unique. I hate it. People, it's happening all across the country. And I get that. I go around the country, I know that, but we here. And what I'm saying is, when I go other places, I meet people from them places. I see people from, Oakland, LA, New York, wherever I'm at, I meet people in my age group from those places. When I'm home, I don't see that enough. And so when this stuff goes and it starts and people can't connect, I mean, I'm gonna give you something that I thought I just occurred based on what you said and what you said, bro. The mayor has created an amazing thing called the DC Infrastructure Academy, where it prepares DC residents for jobs in the infrastructure industry or whatever.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The Infrastructure Academy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, yep,
Okay.
2330 Pomeroy Road, I think. And so, just imagine, right, if it was like a cannabis college, if you will, within the Infrastructure Academy, preparing residents for those jobs. Now, but here's the caveat. Who would that be attractive to? We live in a city that has such a educated workforce, skilled workforce. For something like that, even these jobs, who's going to be attracted to those jobs? It's going to be the people I grew up with, the people that's unemployed, the people that may not have the education, but guess what they do have? Criminal history. So again, we must remove the barriers that would stop people that need it the most from participating.
Again, I mean, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, again, this is one of these areas where I think that in Washington, D.C., we're getting it right. You know what I mean? Like in Washington, D.C., you can have a related marijuana offense. You could have even gone to jail, and you could have gotten out, and you can get a job in a medical marijuana dispensary here in Washington, D.C. We've worked hard over the last few years.
Well, how many return citizens were? Because I don't want this to be like, I'm not doing, but I want to know.
What I can tell you is that my employee base, there are at least, I currently employ about 18 people here in Washington, D.C., and I have at least 4 people that have marijuana-related offenses that currently work for me.
Oh, just marijuana-related offenses?
Right.
Yeah. Well, currently it's just marijuana-related offenses, but what we are trying to do is make it drug-related offenses all around. Or, you know, there has never been a restriction on someone having a criminal background. The restriction in Washington, D.C. started out having a drug-related offense. It was always the case in Washington, D.C. that you could come out and have some sort of issue on your background and then get a job in the cannabis space. The only restriction that we previously had was a drug-related offense. And now that has been removed, you know, at least for marijuana, but not for other drugs. And so we have some ways to go, and we can get there. But I do applaud the fact that we have the kind of city council with Councilmember Grasso, former Councilmember Alexander played a large role in a lot of this stuff, and our mayor has been very good at making sure that we try to create bridges to access versus barriers to access. And I think
can I say this though? I want to just be clear though that let me say this though. This is not my comments. It's not saying that the city is not doing what they're supposed to do, that we're not moving in the right direction. My comments don't come in I've worked with those very people, right, continuously, right? What I'm saying is, first of all, I wasn't purely talking about marijuana-related offenses. I'm talking about people, because most people don't have just marijuana. It might start there, right? So more by and large, the people that I deal with every day in my life for the last 16 years, they may have a marijuana-related offense somewhere in there, but that's not the only thing. So, and I applaud all of the things that we've done thus far. What I'm saying, in order for this stuff to trickle down as much as we needed to, not that we wanted to, as we needed to, we talking about out of 160 homicides, 152 of them people from here, black people. When you look at the criminal justice system, and 90-some% of that is black people, I'm saying we needed to go further. That's not a shot at where it is right now. I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, you preach it to the choir on that.
Then you need to say that. Don't.
Yeah, no, it's
like, no,
I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a commitment to being engaged around policymaking. I think an example of what you're talking about, brothers, like for instance, in LA, Chicago's a little different. I'm not certain about what it is here, but there's seasoning requirements. So if it's a cannabis offense, there's nothing. If there was a gun involved in an offense, then it's got to have 3 years since it happened in order for people to apply for a license. If there were other types of offenses, cocaine-related offenses and so on, they're just different seasoning requirements. I think what's been demonstrated here is we have conscientious policymakers who, if they're informed about what's happening around the country, would probably adopt some of these things. But I also don't want to lose focus on the kind of the entirety of the opportunity. This is a $10 billion industry currently. It's going to be a $50 billion industry in a few short years and more. It's going to be a $100 billion industry 10 years from now or more than that. And we have suffered more than 2/3 of the criminal justice, the impact of criminal justice all across the country. And we currently have less than 1% of the opportunity, right? So what will the job market look like over time if we only have 1% of the licenses and 1% of the ownership, right? So we need to be focused with policymakers first around licensing and what the laws look like, and know that predatory actors are going to come in, which is why our policymakers have to be very vigilant. They have to know who are the credible people on the ground that are going to do the right things for the right reasons. I am telling you, there are multi-state operators with clipboards in Illinois right now signing people up to apply in this licensing window to guarantee that people will sell those businesses for pennies on the dollar for what those businesses will be worth, because that's how the policy is set up. But you cannot legislate perfectly. It cannot happen. I would tell you in LA, there are predatory actors. Whatever we set up here, as we go to adult use. There will be predatory actors. The policymakers and the folks that are doing the point system on the application or first company or however it works need to be able to have the leverage to determine the quality of the humanity that's going to get those licenses and do the right things for the right reasons by the citizens of the city of Washington, D.C.
All right, so now let's start taking some questions from the audience. Ms. Steiner, I see your hand up, please.
Thank you. Again, excuse me, Linda. My name is Debbie Steiner. I'm active in the community, Tony and all of us. First, we have DISB. There's an opportunity that allows for entrepreneurs to use that gateway for some type of capital, because capital has been a very hard challenge for us. But my key thing is just like what Tony was just getting to, and it is no slight on anyone. So, you know, if it's a shoe fit, wear it. If it doesn't, throw it away. But we know white privilege has hampered a lot of progress for people, number one. Number two, as Tony was expressing, our people, and I'm a native Washingtonian that has struggled through the bad times, and we're now going through these good times, and we're now seeing this industry that allows for the disenfranchised to be able to participate and be a part of. Like this gentleman said, we need to be able to have some type of a strong coalition that then we can build off of, that then allows for a joint venture that can allow or prevent from the predators or those other people from coming in. Because just like when we have the situation with the builders, you have a lot of people that come into DC that are building all these buildings. They have a office space in DC that says it's their headquarters, but in actuality, they're from Virginia, Montana, somewhere else. And you have a lot of other people from other states coming in that are taking away from us that want to really be a part of it. And it is time now that the crab in the barrel issue is dismissed, that we all try to find a way to come together to make this successll. But thanks.
So just really quick, because that...
Well, I was supposed to ask a question, because I'm just expressing the need that we need to find the way to allow the residents that have been struggling to find an entrepreneur way to be successful, so we can stop all those murders that are happening over east of the river, over a piece of, like the couple kids got shot over their father at a corner selling some water and some whatever, Gatorade, and got upset with somebody else and takes a gun and shoots a kid. Come on. But thank you.
Well, let me, really quick, because there was definitely a question in there, and I think the question is, and this speaks to kind of what Kareem was just saying about like the bigger players. When these markets open up, you're going to have multi-state operators come in, and they're going to have the best lawyers. They're going to find the cleverest ways to not break the law, but break the spirit of the law by having just like an empty office in DC, but they're really from out of state. If this happens in DC, do you think there are ways? Do you think the city is ready? Do you think applicants are ready to kind of like push back against the force of these multi-state operators? Let's say like Philip Morris decides they really want in on this market. Can DC residents find a way to, can DC push back on that?
DC has to push back on it. And so DC recognizes that what the example that you just shared is happening everywhere. And so now we have to start holding these companies accountable. If I come to you and I'm awarded this license and I say that I'm hiring 50 people from DC and that I'm giving back to schools and healthy food programs, you gotta hold them accountable. If you would take that license or not grant someone a contract or something for any other reason, we have to start to apply that to the cannabis industry. Congresswoman Barbara Lee introduced the Respect Resolution. The MCBA took that Respect Resolution and created a model municipal ordinance for social equity. That is all the District of Columbia needs to overlay its plan for regulating adult use cannabis in the district. That will speak to social justice, criminal justice reform. It will speak to jobs. It will speak to training. It will speak to records. And of course, the District of Columbia is different than Virginia or Maryland as it relates to expungement and things like that. But as we legislate, we have to say we will not only allow these people to participate, but we will prioritize and we will offer up these resources that are necessary. And it probably doesn't sound like a place to compare DC to, but Humboldt County, California, where you had generations of cannabis farmers that were scared to become a part of the regulated market. That county essentially just had a program where they said, hey, come talk to us. Let us tell you that we're not out to get you, that we want to see you get into this and we want to help you get it right. And so that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to wrap our arms around the people that most folks are scared to talk to. Right. Let's be clear. And when we talk about access to capital and that being a barrier to entry, folks, the reality is that it's not a barrier to entry at this point. The M&A game, the mergers and acquisitions that are happening today, we're not competing. So until we, for once in our lifetime, get rid of the crabs in a barrel mentality and actually come together. Who owns property in DC? Who owns property in DC? Who has a retail establishment? Who has a restaurant? These are the business owners and entrepreneurs that you need to connect with, that are going to connect with the folks from the community that can then go connect with the folks that, again, are the legacy operators. And we're going to say, you can't come into DC and get a license to operate unless you're partnering with this local group. This local group wants to see X, Y, and Z. Don't let that company bring their culture here. Right. You have culture. You have a mission and a vision. Leverage them. The state of Colorado, oldest, maturest market, is just now allowing for outside investment. You can believe that the owners in Colorado are not looking to give up the companies that they have started and been able to withstand the storm with to these outside operators. What they're going to do is leverage their capital. And that's what we need to wrap our heads around and do here.
Kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, I believe also that it's not, a lack of access to capital. I mean, there are some people who do have that as a major hurdle. But even if that is a problem for someone, I don't believe it's their biggest problem. Okay. I believe that the biggest problem is large outside corporations coming in and influencing the rules in a way that, one, either prevent you from getting a license or getting access and being able to do business with the industry, or making it too expensive for you to be able to do that, right? There is no reason why some states are charging millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars just to be able to apply, right? But here in the district, we don't do that. So there are a lot of things that I feel like we've gotten right. We have a long way to go, but we have the kind of city council that wants to get it right, and that's the best place to start. We have the kind of mayor's office that wants to get it right, and so what we now have to do is to make sure that we're in their face, making sure that they know what it is we want. And I believe in DC you can actually get it. So if we want a strong social equity program, we can actually have that. If we want to make sure that the city-funded incubators around town have workforce training programs and stuff like that, I believe that the city council and the mayor's office would love to make sure that they are actually involved in making sure that happens. If we want to make sure that we have the kind of partnership requirements for existing business operators, I believe we can do that. Let's understand that our city has a history of doing that. We had a great mayor, Marion Barry, that made it a point to actually make sure that if you were going to be a big developer and came into this city, you were going to partner with a developer from this city. And so we can still have those kinds of opportunities in this space. We just need to make sure that we are in front of our city council, making sure that they understand that that is what we want.
All right, so real quick, sorry. Wait, Ms. Steiner, can I take another question real quick? So, ma'am, right here in the middle, please.
Okay. Hi. My name is Misty Brown. Thank you all, and we definitely want to thank the mayor and the council members for spearheading this. All of us in the audience, we want to know, what is legacy operators? We think it's people who grew illegal.
The people I was getting cannabis from before I had a way to get it legally.
Right, okay, that's clear. Because we thought it meant that. When did they start calling people that?
I've been calling them that for a little while now.
You started
really
this.
I didn't start it, but I heard it and I liked it. Moving away from the black market, the gray and all these other terms that we're using, I think that it's important for us to break stigma, right? When you think about black market, you are typically thinking about this person who is on a corner doing some kind of shady business. These are healers. These are people that have learned this plant and have made it their life's mission to make it available to people who need it, even when the government was telling us that we shouldn't. And so that is a legacy that I think should be upheld and put on a pedestal. And again, we need to prioritize and give resources to these folks. I walk into so many cannabis operations, they're well funded and they run like crap. Because you don't have people that are passionate or qualified and skilled to work in this space, but they knew who to pay off to get the license. They went and hired the best consultants, and they're here now. Now what they're starting to wrap their minds around is the fact that maybe they don't have the best expertise. And so you've seen some of these companies actually get behind some of the social justice work that you hear us talk about. And now they're saying, well, maybe these folks should have an opportunity to play. They're some of my best growers, or they're some of my best extractors. And so that is the meaning of it. It's something that I heard, and I'm trying to spread it. And so I hope that if that makes sense to you, that you start to use it as well.
Well, we are going to start using it. I had one other question in reference to commerce. Everybody talk about you could get into business, but when you ask, how can I get a job in the business? How can I network with somebody in the business? Even at the dispensary, everything is hush-hush. And it's just hush-hush. Nobody talks. They say, oh, we're going to get around. We're going to get to know you and everything. Then the other thing is when you go online, everything is closed. You can't apply for anything. How do you get into the business of DC? Don't spend a lot of time because everybody's going to be asking you personally. But just tell us how. Just the first step. Just to get a job at a dispensary without knowing an owner, because the staff is not going to tell you anything. Really. And that's what you are confronted with when you inquire about how do I get into this business.
So on the state side of things, DC or most of the states in our country have not done a good job of making this information easily accessible or done a very good job of communicating the information out in a timely manner that would actually allow you to fully prepare to compete for these applications. That's not lost on probably nobody on this panel. The state of Missouri, which is the most recent state to go through licensing, is probably the best, has done the best job to date in terms of communicating, breaking it down into infographics so that people aren't trying to read through pages and pages and pages of legalese. And then, of course, so that's where the states are now starting to course correct on information, right? And then you'll see legislation that says for communities that have been impacted, you need to do additional outreach. So that's what we need to push and continue. We need to push to continue to see. In terms of a local market and kind of the networking, I think that there are a number of organizations, especially in the DMV and DC specifically, that you can get connected with to kind of keep your ear to the ground for jobs. I know my good friend Linda Green from Anacostia Organics. when she was in the process of, before she was even ready to hire. You know, she was putting, as soon as she was confident that she would be hiring, she put the word out. Now, that was an individual effort, and I just happened to be close enough to know of it. But it's something that we all have to try to do better from an industry perspective, government perspective, and then in these organizations, it's just something that we're all trying to do better at.
All right, there's another question in the back there.
My name is Tasha Ferguson. I, too, am a native Washingtonian. I, too, was a part of, or am a part of, we're going to call a spade, the shit show we call Maryland Minority Cannabis Licensing. I applied for my grower's license and my processing license, but big business made a way through. As far as you, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Corey?
Yeah.
Corey. I love your perspective because you sound very much like corporate America. You are giving the perspective as a business owner that's operating in multiple states in an industry that is booming, but you're from a very corporate side of things. When you said that you can't include investment and capital as a barrier, that is the furthest thing from the truth.
That's not what I said. But what I did say was that it is a barrier for a lot of people, but even for those people, I don't believe it is their biggest barrier. I believe their biggest barrier is that sometimes your capital doesn't matter. Sometimes,
right, for sure.
Sometimes it's your color, and it's the fact that you aren't already a big business,
for
and
sure.
they won't even
but
let
even to get to that point, to get to the point where you absolutely need capital, let's talk numbers. Let's talk real numbers. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm at about 150 grand with no knowledge of knowing whether or not I'm actually going to get this license that has been put on hold because of all of the controversy and scandal that's going on with it. After that, then just at a minimum for a grower's license to operate in the state of Maryland, you're looking at about $3.5 to $4 million at just a very basic
So you're actually
level.
making my point. Like, if we want to talk real numbers, my first dispensary, I started with $50,000.
But that's a dispensary.
My second dispensary, I started with 75. I started District Growers, which is a grower processor. We extract, we make edibles, we make concentrates. I started that with under $300,000. That included the application process, down payment for my lease, and everything. What makes these things expensive, and so expensive to actually get, is the cost of regulation and big business coming in and stirring up the market, hiring lobbyists, making people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to just get access to people that can even allow you to tell your story.
Right.
And so that is what's driving up the cost. It's not actually the cost of action. Like, the cost of starting a dispensary isn't that much different than the cost of starting a bakery if you take out the cost of inventory.
But it's not just that. It's not just that.
A cultivation operation is not that much different.
You
than
have to get to the point where
grow,
you can get to a point to
farm.
apply. Like,
People
you have
can
to
do
be
it.
able to do that. And when you're speaking with people like Tony Lewis and his clients who are just coming home, they're returning citizens, they're trying to figure out, one, how they're going to be able to pay the fees that are still associated with them coming home. Then they have to take care of themselves, let alone they may have another family. You can't even get out of the gate. You can't even get out of the gate. Then you have to find a place, like Shanita said, either a consultant that's going to write your application, or hopefully the government, the city government, or whatever your municipality is, will provide a space for you to get a workshop where you learn how to write the application, but that still takes time. So if you have to have the time, but if I can't afford to live, how am I going to find the time to get somewhere and apply and go to a class where I've got to get there, I've got to get back, I've got to be able to eat, and I still have to look for a job so that I can pay my bills. Like, all of these, there are so many just aspects of this industry that's just, for people that look like me, it's so far from a reality. It's a reality, and you can do it, but it's so far from being able to touch. And then when you experience the people of color in the industry, they're not exactly willing to give you the information that you need in order to just succeed. And then you have to also look at the cost
really quick,
of...
I just stop you real quick because I was been told by the folks running it that we're basically out of time. So there's more time that we can talk afterwards, that you can talk to all the panelists, and that's like, this is a really good debate. I want to throw one last quick.
question really quickly.
Yeah, please.
Just make a comment about what's your name? Tasha. Tasha. I see you, and thank you for your testimony because it's real. That's why we're here.
Right.
You know, I think I'm not in the cultivation space. I'm in the retail space. But the exact thing that you're experiencing from a cultivation space is the solve that we have on the retail space. I hope that the brother here, people like Shanita who have that experience, that we can figure out ways to work together to create a solution. For us, it's about not making people wrong, the ability to go out and attract the kind of capital that allows us to partner with folks just like you to go do the application, to go do the government relations, to spend the money that we spend, to have a seat at the table, to represent people like you and Tony's clients over time so we can make sure we increase our percentage of ownership, focus on our way of being, what we're committed to creating, not just for ourselves, but for African American people in this country, the descendants of slaves who deserve to get the majority of the resources, the bread from this industry over time, and hold our policymakers accountable to ensuring that opportunity.
So then, in that, I just want to close with one last quick question, kind of like a lightning question for all the panelists. Just jump ahead, think 10 years from now. Like, are you optimistic that DC can get this right or get as close to being right as this industry could be at this point? Like, do you think DC can be a model, or are you concerned that it won't be, that it's not going to get there?
I am absolutely hopeful. I talk about this every day, all day. This has probably been my favorite panel of the year because we aren't just talking about the problem. We've actually engaged the appropriate stakeholders and folks that have solutions. I am very excited to be here with you, and I'm grateful for your last point. We've lived and breathed Maryland, and for me, it's been 2 times now, 2015 and this year. And what you've experienced is enough to shut most people down. What we have to do is pull from that and move forward. And so I'm hopeful that, yes, we will get it right. And we have to get it right in order to set the example for other cities that look like Washington, D.C. throughout this country.
Corey?
I believe that DC has the best shot at getting it right. And if we don't get it right in Washington, D.C., I don't believe we realize just how defeating that will be almost to everywhere in the country. Like, you know, I mean, we are as close to getting it right as any place is in the country. And if we don't get it right here, I don't believe they will get it right in any other place in the country. And so certainly our neighbors to the north in Maryland are continuing to go their route. But we've been able to put a stop on a lot of the funny business when it comes to Washington, D.C. I believe we'll continue to be able to do that. We have to. And if we don't, it's a bigger problem than we know.
Tony?
Yeah. Just sort of piggyback on what Corey said, I feel like we don't have a choice. And particularly, you know, I feel like too many of our residents are in a situation where they feel like they're drowning, and this could be sort of a life raft, and I think we can't ride past them in that way. I also think about, you know, as it relates to things like affordable housing and reentry services, education, obviously, sort of the revenue that's generated from this can hopefully that's also a point that I think is important, connecting that money to the appropriate things to help everybody get on board, because ultimately that just will help us, again, be the best city in America. So I'm looking forward to the future.
All right, Kareem, you got the last word.
Yeah, I think the fact that this convening, you know, that the city and the mayor has put forth for us today is indicative of the desire to get it right. The fact that the current ownership structure in the city looks like no place else in the country is indicative of the right start. And I think the fact that there are social equity programs around the country that have either stood up or on the precipice of standing up right now gives us an opportunity as we look to go recreational to see what's really working and what's not working. So this city, I think, is prime and best positioned of any to really get it right.
All right, well, thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much to the panelists for participating. This was fantastic. I think there's one last quick announcement from the mayor's folks.
Yeah, thank you so much all for engaging. Please join me in thanking Martin and the panelists for such a robust conversation. I do want to say that these conversations are going to continue, and we at the Mayor's Office of Policy are going to continue to create spaces like this where we can bring diverse stakeholders and voices to the table. To learn more about the Mayor's Safe Cannabis legislation and to get updates from us, please go to mayor.dc.gov/marijuana. And the last thing I want to say is that the cannabis track continues this afternoon with a keynote fireside chat between Mayor Bowser and Angela Rye as they discuss how to make sure that Washington, D.C. becomes the capital of inclusive cannabis. Thank you all so much for being a respectful audience.